Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be reading some more of one of my favorite books, After Hello. We are almost done. We're in chapter 39 out of 41, or 29 out of 41. We have that much left, so let's see how much we can get read tonight. I kind of want to finish this soon for you guys. So I am going to be reading this at a whisper, softly spoken. I hope it's not too loud. Yeah, I wish I had a camera set up where you could see it and follow along with me, but I'm not that advanced yet. Maybe one day I'll have that. If you do like videos like that, Destiny Whispers, she has some bomb videos of her reading. It's so good, so good. I would check her out. My son really loves one of her videos in particular where she's reading The Giving Tree and something about caps, like cats and monkeys. I don't remember what that one is called, but that's a good video. My son falls asleep to it every time. Like every time we watch it, he'll sleep. So let's continue. We are on Sara. If you guys haven't been watching or listening to this book previously, go to my After Hello playlist and you can start from the beginning. Because you'll be kind of confused if you just listen to it now. But yeah, let's start. So this is Sara. I said again in my head, I'm not sorry you put your hands on my shoulders. I'm not sorry you looked at me like you knew everything about me. I'm not sorry I took your picture this morning. I'm not sorry about today. I wanted to let the words spill out of me, but I couldn't. I didn't want to break whatever spell had been woven between me and Sam. I was afraid that if I said anything, did anything, if I took a single step away from him, this connection we had would turn as thin as silk, as fragile as a whisper, and break. Sara, I heard my name, but Sam's mouth hadn't moved. Strange. His gaze jerked away from mine with an almost audible snap. He stared past my shoulder, his face sliding behind the same mask he'd worn when I'd first seen him outside the bookstore. A hand grabbed my arm and spun me on my heel. "Dad?" I squeaked. He was mad. I hadn't seen him this mad in years, maybe not since the day before Mom left. His thinning brown hair was dark with sweat. Stray strands standing up in all directions. His cheeks were flushed as though he had run a long distance. His green eyes, the same color as mine, everyone said so, were bright with emotion. "I thought you said you were coming back right after dinner." The veins in his neck bulged beneath the open collar of his button-down shirt. The muscles on his arms flexed. He'd rolled up his sleeves almost to his elbows. The sparkling lights caught the gold glint of his wristwatch. I did, I stammered. "We had to wait for the subway and we were kind of far away." Dad's eyes glared past me. "Who's that?" he snapped. I twisted it around as much as I could without breaking free of my dad's grip. He wasn't going to let me go, and I knew better than to push my luck at the moment. "That's Sam," I said. "He's my friend, the one I was having dinner with." Sam nodded in neutral greeting. "It's nice to meet you." His body was tall and straight, but I saw the exact moment when he shifted his weight forward on his toes. He was ready to run. Some of Dad's anger faded when he saw how normal Sam looked. He drew in a shaking breath and ran his free hand over his head, messing up his hair even more. "I told you I was okay, Dad," I said to Dad. You didn't need to freak out about anything. He barked out a short laugh. I've been walking around Times Square for almost an hour looking for you. I've been checking my phone every 2 minutes. Why didn't you call me? I didn't think I needed to, I snapped back. I told you I was coming back. Why didn't you believe me? You're 17 years old, Sarah. You're too young to be out in the city alone. You didn't seem to care that you left me alone this afternoon. I yanked my arm free from his hand and took a step back. Besides, I wasn't alone. I was with Sam. It's true, sir, Sam said, his voice cool and professional. I showed her some of the sights, St. John's Cathedral, Central Park, and then she asked me to bring her back to Times Square. Dad relaxed a little more, reserving his irritation for me instead of Sam. Thanks, he grunted. I'm sorry if she bothered you. She wasn't a bother, Sam returned. He swallowed, then looked down at me. A flash of emotion appeared in his eyes. Regret? Relief? I'll see you around, Sarah. He shifted his weight again, his body pivoting away from me. No, wait! I shouted, lunging for Sam's arm, not caring what anyone thought of me. My own thoughts had boiled down to this one truth. If Sam disappeared into the crowds right now, I would never see him again. I couldn't let that happen. Sarah? My dad grabbed for me again, but I was already out of reach. I latched onto Sam and he froze. His gaze darted between my hand and his arm, and my eyes that stayed focused on his face. 20 minutes, I pleaded with him. Give me 20 minutes, then I'll be back. You will not, young lady, my dad said. It's late, and I don't want you going out any more tonight with some boy you just met. He thinned his lips and looked at Sam. No offense. None taken, Sam said, lifting his shoulder coolly and straightening his bag across his chest. I increased the pressure on Sam's arm until he looked away from my dad and back to me. When I knew I had his attention again, I spoke quietly, fiercely. I promised to fix things with Paul and Piper. We promised. I can't walk away from that. 20 minutes, I'll meet you. My eyes scanned the square, outside that toy store. I pointed at a huge multicolored sign that dominated the building's storefront. Sam followed my gaze. His face showed the most uncertainty I'd seen from him all day. I don't know, I'll trade you for it, I blurted. You give me 20 minutes and I'll give you the story. My story. That's enough, Dad growled, closing the space between us and grabbing my arm again. He dragged me backwards, my feet tripping over themselves as I alternately tried to keep up with Dad and stay closer to Sam. Good night, Sam, Dad said, his voice the sound of a closing door, and goodbye. I held Sam's gaze for as long as I could, silently pleading for him to wait. And then the masses swept between us like a wave, and he was gone. I found my footing and pulled my arm away. Let go, Dad. I can walk by myself. He clamped his hand on my shoulder, steering me through the narrow pathways that opened and closed as the flow of people shifted and spun. We threaded our way toward a tall gray building plastered with signs and lights. Our hotel. Our home away from home. The last thing I wanted to do was walk through that opulent lobby, ride the elevator to the 19th floor, and stay locked away in my room until morning. I had things I needed to do tonight, things that couldn't wait. But Dad was mad. Too mad to let me out of his sight again? Probably. I stumbled along next to him as he stomped his way forward. Change that probably to definitely. We reached the glass doors of the lobby. Dad, I tried. Dad, wait! He staggered to a stop just to the side of the revolving doors and faced me. What, Sarah? What? That's when I noticed that the rims around his eyes were red with tears and not anger. The high color in his cheeks had pale spots of fear. He wasn't mad, he was sad. I started, all my frustration and anger drained away. Dad wasn't a crier. Mom said he hadn't cried at their wedding or at my birth. I'd seen for myself that Dad hadn't cried when Mom had walked out on me. On us, I corrected in my head. He sagged against the glass and rubbed his hand over his face. What, Sarah? He asked again, this time in a tone of surrender. What can I do? Tell me what you want me to do, because I don't know anymore. You say you want to spend time with me. You're mad at me when I have to work all day, even when it's important. But then when I do have time and even suggest celebrating together, you act like you can't stand to be around me. That's not true. My words lacked force. We both knew he was closer to being right than I was. I heard you say you wanted to meet that boy later. You'd rather spend time with a stranger than with your own father. I gritted my teeth, grinding the guilt into a thick paste that coated my tongue. I could barely get the words out. His name is Sam, and he's not a stranger. Not anymore, I added to myself. What's his last name? I blinked. What? His last name. If he's not a stranger, then what's his last name? I opened my mouth, then closed it. Casting my mind back over the day, I searched for the answer to Dad's question, but I came up empty. Had Sam ever told me his full name? Had I told him mine? Dad waved his hand, his face weary and strained. It doesn't matter. Let's go inside. I took a step back. It does matter, Dad. Yes, I spent the day wandering all over the city, but you told me to have fun, and that's what I was doing. And you know what? Being with Sam was fun. Maybe I don't know his full name, or where he was born, or what shoe size he wears, but I know other things about him. Important things. Yes, we spent time together, and now he's my friend. That's how it works. Maybe if we weren't such strangers, we could have spent the day together. Maybe we could have had fun together. Maybe then we'd be friends too. As soon as the words were out, I covered my mouth with my hand. Dad recoiled as though I'd slapped him. A coldness crept through me, turning my toes, my feet, my legs to ice. The red spots vanished from Dad's face, leaving behind only the chalk-white fear. I didn't mean that, I whispered. Honest, I didn't. Dad held my gaze, his green eyes dull and distant. Yes, he said, you did. The coldness rose past my hips all the way to my heart. Dad looked away, studying the flickering lights around us as though they might spell out the answer to his questions in code. You're a lot like your mom. Did you know that? I'm nothing like her, I said, frowning, but my mouth felt numb. He didn't seem to hear me. You are both strong-willed and stubborn. You both speak your mind no matter what. You both have this simple dimple that shows up only when you're mad. Frowning makes it more visible too, you know. I forced my mouth to flatten into a line. His own mouth flattened to match. And neither one of you likes to admit when you've made a mistake. My inhaled breath felt sharp in my throat. My nose and cheeks tingled. The edges of my visions blurred. A dull roar sounded in the back of my head. A wave that crashed through me, washing away thought and leaving behind only instinct. That's not true. Mom knew being with you was a mistake. That's why she left. I took another step away from him. No, Sarah, Dad said, his voice trembling and his face ashen. That's not why she left. Then why? Those two words ripped through me like thunder following lightning. A stab of energy and a nothing but noise. Why did she leave? For 8 years I had wondered. I'd waited for Dad to tell me something, anything about why, about the why behind everything that had happened. But he had kept his silence. I think he was afraid to say. I know I was afraid to ask. What if the answer was me? That she left because of me? And why didn't she ever come back? Sam, chapter 30. Sam paced outside the door of the toy store. Boxes were stacked on the other side of the window in neat pyramids and piles. Just beyond was a giant white indoor Ferris wheel. He watched as a mother crouched down next to a small boy and pointed to the slowly rotating wheel. The boy's eyes were bright with amazement and anticipation, locked on the one empty chair as though he could imagine himself already there, hands up, head back. As the chair reached the top of the wheel, the boy rose up on his toes. When the wheels settled to a stop in front of the boy, the mother smiled encouragingly, gesturing that it was his turn. But suddenly the boy wasn't having any of it. He curled his shoulders inward and shook his head, shy and scared. Sam shifted his weight and settled his bag on his hip. It seemed impossible that joy could turn to fear so quickly, that the two emotions could occupy the same space, but he knew it was true. It was on display right there in front of him. It was buried deep in his heart. When Sara had asked him to stay and had promised to trade her story for his time, his joy had immediately turned to fear. The moment she had disappeared from view, he had been in motion. His first thought had been to get back to the subway and ride the train all the way back home, to put as much distance between him and Sara as he could. It was one thing for him to tell her his story. He was counting on sending that story away with her at the end of the day, never to return. Like tying a wish to a balloon and then setting it free, or writing a message, sliding it into a bottle and throwing it into the ocean. You stand and watch it drift away, a dot in the sky or a flash of glass on the horizon, and then it's gone. But if Sara told him her story, then the balance shifted. They would be connected and stay connected, even if she floated away and disappeared, never to return. The place inside of him that had held on to the memory of Alice and the horror of that night, the place that had been scoured clean by that sacred inside quiet ever since he'd given that story to Sara, would be filled with a new story, a potentially sad story, one starring Sara and her dad and the mom she never mentioned. He didn't know if he could shoulder that burden again. But was it fair to expect Sara to shoulder his burden all alone? He'd been concentrating so much on the freedom he felt that he hadn't really considered the question. A small part of him said she was strong and stubborn, she would be fine. But the rest of him knew that it wasn't right. A story for a story was definitely a fair trade. He'd said so to Sara earlier that very same day. And Sam never said no to a trade. So instead of heading toward the subway station, he headed toward the toy store, where he leaned his shoulder against the glass, watching, waiting, hoping he was doing the right thing, hoping his wish would come true, hoping for rescue. The mom inside the store took her son's hand and gave it a squeeze. He saw her mouth the words, "Maybe next time." Together they headed up the stairs. He checked the time. Had it been 20 minutes yet? Longer? It felt like he'd been waiting forever. He wondered what he would do if Sara didn't show. Her dad had been pretty upset. Sam figured there was a better than even chance that her dad would forbid her from going back out tonight. How long should he wait? He scanned the crowd, not really seeing faces, just shapes and colors. He let the noise wash over him like music. The mixture of hum and roar was comforting, familiar, the sound of movement. A line of people passed by, and in between the small gap of space between the last two people in line, he saw Sara coming toward him. He straightened up, pulling his hands from his pockets. She wore his borrowed jeans and the same red t-shirt. She had the same bag slung over her shoulder, but even from a distance he could see the dark red rims around her eyes, as though she had hidden all her sadness in the one place she wouldn't be able to see it. He met her halfway, though he didn't remember moving so far so fast. She stopped in front of him, her arms wrapped around her chest as though she was afraid that if she let go, everything would fall apart. "If you need to cry, this is the best place to do it," he said kindly. She breathed out a sound that could have been a laugh but wasn't. "Do a lot of people come to Times Square to cry?" He shook his head. Beats me. But when you cry in public, everyone ignores you, even in a crowd. No, especially in a crowd. It can be surprisingly private. You know this from experience? I've had my days, he hedged. He personally had not shed a tear since moving to New York. But he knew that people avoided anger as much as they avoided tears. He'd once screamed his throat raw on a street corner, and no one had looked twice at him. That was when he'd first learned that isolation could be liberating. She shivered as though a cold breeze had touched her. I'm done crying. Her voice was flat, but the tear that dribbled down her face defied her words. Without a word, Sam reached into his bag and withdrew a travel pack of tissues. Sara accepted the offering, and this time the sound she made was closer to a laugh. Why am I not surprised? I'm not a very surprising person, I guess. Sam had to fight the urge to brush her hair away from her face. Yes, she needed comfort, but whatever had happened had left her fragile. A touch might leave behind a crack, and a crack might be more than she could handle right now. She dabbed at her face with the tissue, her eyes never leaving his. You've surprised me all day, she said quietly. Were you surprised to find me here? Sara cocked her head and thought. No, she said finally, a touch of wonder in her voice. No, I knew you would be here. I knew I could depend on you. A splash of heat hit Sam's heart, warming him from within. How long had it been since someone had depended on him for something more than to finish a job or run an errand? How long had it been since he'd had a friend depending on him? The dog tags hung heavy around his neck, and the memory of Alice's sky-blue eyes left him cold. You okay? Sara asked. Yeah, he said, suppressing a flinch. Here she was obviously upset, and yet she was the one worried about him. It's just, I'm a little surprised to see you. I didn't think your dad would let you out of his sight again. To her credit, she didn't turn and look back toward the hotel, but he could see the effort it cost her. Her shoulders stiffened and her mouth turned down in a frown. The small dimple he'd noticed before made a brief appearance. I don't think he ever wants to see me again. He's your dad. He said if I wanted to go, then maybe I should just go. I'm sure he told me to leave, she said bluntly. So I did. She pivoted away and started walking toward the subway station. Sam waited a single beat before catching up to her. Where are we going? I want to see the Empire State Building. He touched her elbow, but though it made a shock travel through his fingers, it hardly slowed her down. I see it all the time in movies. It's iconic. It's New York. I want to see the Empire State Building. Her voice broke the second time she said the name. Sam noticed another set of tears appear in her eyes, but though they trembled on her lashes, they didn't fall. Sara was right. She was done with crying. It's the tallest building in the city, right? How tall is it? Like 100 feet? 102 stories, actually. Cool. I want to go all the way to the top. That costs extra, Sam warned. He knew she was short on money, and it didn't sound like her dad had sent her out the door with a pocket full of cash. She shrugged, her mouth sad. It always does. That's cryptic. Her shoulders slumped. Everything costs more than you think it does, that's all. And what you get in return is usually not what you wanted. Not really. Sara, he touched her elbow again. And this time she did stop. So what is it you want, really? She huffed out a sigh, rolling her eyes. I told you to see the Giants play. Sam didn't laugh. He kept his hand on her arm, waiting. She looked down and jutted out her chin. Her mouth turned hard and stubborn. I want to see the Empire State Building. Sam waited until she looked at him. The bright lights lit up her eyes like emeralds. He held his breath and slipped his hand down her arm and folded his fingers around hers. When she didn't pull away, he exhaled and allowed himself a moment to enjoy the warmth that sprang up from everywhere they touched. Then come with me, he said. Sara. Chapter 31. This will probably be the last chapter tonight. Sam held my hand all the way to Rockefeller Center. The plaza felt a little like Times Square. Lots of people, lots of energy, fewer signs. The stores lining the walkways were dark, closed for the evening. I wondered why they didn't stay open all night. With all the people still milling around, they would make a fortune. Next to the wide sidewalk area was the famous spot where the ice skating rink would be in the winter, and the place where the Christmas tree would stand, dressed all in lights. Tonight there was no tree, no ice, but I still felt like the ground beneath my feet was fragile. A pane of glass that prevented me from falling, but just barely. The only thing keeping me anchored and steady was Sam's hand closed around mine. I thought back to when he had held my hand in the elevator on our way to Piper's suite. I had the same stomach-dropping sensation now as I did then. But then I had also enjoyed the possibility of a whole day spread out before me, unmapped, unmarred. Now the day was over, and I felt like I had ruined everything. Dad was right. I should have stayed in the hotel. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Sam pulled my attention away from my dark and broken thoughts. He leaned back on his heels and looked up at the towering column in front of us. I followed his gaze up and up and up along the clean lines of the building, and for a moment the dizzying sense of vertigo that had followed me from Times Square stabilized around me. I felt surprisingly calm standing at the base of the building. This doesn't look like the Empire State Building, I said. Sam offered me a small grin. It's not. Then why are we here? I told you I wanted to go to the Empire State Building. No, you said you wanted to see the Empire State Building. And the best place to see it is from here, on top of the rock. Sam's grin grew in size. After all, you can't see the building if you're standing on the building. I put my free hand on my hip and drawled. You should be a tour guide. And show people the famous sights around town. I might as well have Will's job. I saw the moment when he realized what he had said because a smile wiped away clean. I squeezed his hand. Not your fault, you know. He squeezed my back but didn't look at me. Come on, let's go to the top. We stepped into the lobby. A giant crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling like frozen rain. The cool blue walls and the white marble steps that circled in a descending spiral made me feel like I was making a grand entrance in some silent movie. The line for tickets wasn't too bad, but it still took us a few minutes to wind through the aisles marked across the floor and then zigzag our way up to the registers. When we reached the front of the line, Sam leaned his elbows on the counter and smiled at the clerk. Hi, Lauren. How have you been? A girl with long blonde hair and delicate square glasses smiled long and slow, like a cat stretching in the sun. Well, look who it is. Trader Sam himself. In the flesh. I haven't seen you since the lecture at the library 2 months ago. I've been busy. Lauren hummed knowingly. She didn't look directly at me, but I felt her evaluating me all the same. Listen, my friend Sara and I would like to see the view from the top. But I'm a little low on cash at the moment. Sam patted his bag. I don't suppose I could trade you for 2 tickets, could I? Lauren rose up on her toes and looked past us to the short line of waiting customers. Apparently satisfied with what she saw, she leaned closer to Sam. What are you offering? She asked quietly. Sam thought for a moment. I hear Daniel Odell is coming to the library next month. I could probably get you tickets. Lauren rolled her eyes. Please. Odell is my favorite author. I already have tickets. What else you got? Her interruption threw Sam off his stride. Oh, well, he reached into his bag. I could hear the sound of his hands scrabbling against the fabric. The line of people shuffled restlessly behind us. We didn't have much time left to barter. Will you take this? I asked, reaching into my pocket and withdrawing the small golden angel pin Rebecca had traded me back in Sam's apartment. She'd said it wasn't really her style, but I thought it was pretty. It was about an inch from halo to hem, and the angel's wings were spread open on either side. There was a small, clear crystal set in the spot over the angel's heart. The clasp on the back was a little loose, but not broken. Lauren's eyebrows rose. For 2 tickets? I shrugged and moved to close my fingers around the angel. Lauren's hand flashed out, snatching it from my palm. I didn't say I wouldn't take it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sam look from me to the angel and back again. He looked surprised, and maybe even a little unsettled. Lauren lifted the ID card that hung around her neck and swiped it through the computer scanner. A small click sounded, and she opened the side drawer. Her hand disappeared beneath the level of the counter. I had a sudden vision of Lauren summoning her supervisor with the push of a button and reporting us for trying to bribe her for tickets. I wondered if she would demand that security escort us out of the building. I stepped closer to Sam. "You're not going to get us in trouble now, are you?" He said it as a joke, but a set of worry lines appeared next to his mouth. "Of course not," she said, as though offended we would even consider it. Her voice turned brisk and professional. "My manager always sets aside a few tickets for unexpected VIPs." She brandished 2 tickets in triumph before handing them to Sam and smiling brightly at us both. "And since you are special guests, please accept these complimentary tickets to the observation deck." She lowered her voice and patted Sam on the cheek. "Always a pleasure trading with you, Sam. We close at midnight. Have fun." She lifted her hand and waved at the next person in line to step forward, effectively edging me and Sam out of line and toward the elevator bank. It took less than a minute for the all-glass elevator to whisk us up to the top. And when we stepped out onto the observation deck, I felt like the sky had opened up and all the stars had fallen down to light up the sky, or light up the city spread out at my feet. My mouth opened at the beauty before me, and I stumbled after Sam without saying anything. He led me around the small knots of people crowded close to the edges, the tourists taking pictures of the view and of each other. The small camera flashes glittered like fireflies. The Empire State Building rose out of the jagged city skyline in all its glory, proud and majestic. The building was topped with a glow of red, white, and blue lights. Beyond, a swath of black flowed like a shadow. A river, perhaps, or maybe just more buildings that were closed and quiet for the evening. Sam leaned against the tall stone wall, his gaze sweeping across the scene before us. For as dark as the night was, I was surprised at how much light I could see. Light from the cars traveling the avenues and streets. Liquid gold in one direction, red lava in the other. Light from the apartments stacked one on top of the other. Light from the office windows and storefronts. I imagined I could even see the glow that rose up from the distant Times Square like a white mist. I shivered, but not from the warm breeze that blew endlessly across the observation deck. My dad was down there. Just one small person in an entire city filled with people. I wondered if he felt as alone as I did. I wondered if he cared. I pulled out my camera and took a picture. It turned out a little blurry. It was pretty dark and I didn't have a tripod, but I didn't mind. I liked the way it looked, like an impressionist painting with the lights and colors smeared across a black background. "Like what you see?" Sam asked, breaking into my thoughts. "They don't always light up the building with different colors. I wonder what they're celebrating tonight." "It's beautiful," I managed, my throat unexpectedly tight. Sam turned toward me, lounging against the wall and resting his weight on his elbow. He looked down at his hands, his fingers fidgeting restlessly. His brown hair fell over his eyes. "Can I ask you a question, Sarah?" The rest of me tightened up in anticipation and dread. I had promised to tell Sam my story, but I didn't think he'd want to hear it so soon. And things had happened between when I made that promise and when I found him again. That would make the telling even harder. I swallowed. "Yes," I answered. "Why did you trade away Rebecca's angel?" I blinked. That wasn't the question I was expecting. We needed to give Lauren something for the tickets. Sam kept his eyes on his hands. "True, but I had given that angel to her as a gift. I felt an embarrassed heat rise up in my face. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I hadn't been in the city very long before I met Rebecca. She was new too, and I think we both felt a little out of place. She mentioned once that she wished she had a guardian angel to watch over her, so I found that pin for her. She didn't say anything about that when we traded. Sam waved away my words. Remember what you said on the subway, that sometimes it's okay to hold on to good things, on to the good things. He swept his gaze back over the city. I guess part of me thought Rebecca would hold on to that pin as a good thing. That's why I was surprised to see it in your hand, and then in Lauren's, but I guess it meant more to me than it did to her. I folded my arms across my chest, holding onto my elbows with both hands. Do you want me to try and get it back? The breeze ruffled Sam's hair. No, you traded it fair and square. He lifted his face toward the dark sky. A small, slightly unsettled smile appeared on his lips. You've sent it out into the world. Maybe it'll come back to you at some point, but maybe not. He looked at me directly. His brown eyes filled with shadows, but reflecting pinpricks of light. Yes, sometimes it's okay to hold on to things, but sometimes it's okay to let them go too. Okay, we'll read more next time. Sarah is so close to telling him her story, and all the tears, and then they'll fix Piper's problem, and it'll be awesome. So we'll continue next time. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying this story as much as I love it.